You guys ever played Two Truths and a Lie? Well, today we're gonna play Two Lies and a Truth because we are moderns who are trying to educate in a non-modern way. And guess what? We've been told some lies. Hello and welcome back to The Commonplace. I'm Autumn Kern, and today, like I said, we are gonna play a game. Actually, before we play this game, I'm gonna ask you to go ahead and hit subscribe to The Commonplace. It helps me out, but it definitely helps you out too, because I have a lot of good content coming teaching you the classical Charlotte Mason way at home and in home education, and you don't wanna miss it. So I like games, and one game that I remember playing at camp and growing up was Two Truths and a Lie. Perhaps you've played it too, but we are gonna spin it around today and call it Two Lies and a Truth because I have two lies and one truth, and I'm gonna see if you can figure them out. Now, I host the podcast called The Commonplace, wouldn't you know? And we are working through Mason's 20 principles, if you don't know that. We started in January, we are going to finish, I think, the second week of December. It's definitely in December, so a whole year looking at Mason's 20 principles. But I thought about it this morning, and actually if you took 5 hours, I think will be the total time at the end, you could listen to all of season 2 because my episodes are about 15 minutes long. And in doing that, you would have an introductory level to Mason's 20 principles. So if you are a new homeschooling mom, if you are just new to Mason or the classical model, and you feel like, oh my goodness, there's so much, how do these fit together? I can't read 6 volumes before we start school. We've already started school, whatever it is. Let me encourage you to listen to season 2 because that's what we're doing. We're getting our pedagogy in place. And so last week on the podcast, which I will link below, we talked about principle number 16. And really it goes 16 through 19 because Mason is introducing in principle 16 the idea of the way of the will and the way of the reason. And in classic Mason way, she says that every child has 2 guides to their moral and intellectual growth and formation, the way of the will and the way of the reason. And doesn't that sound so simple? Except, my friend, what in the world are the way of the will and the way of the reason? So, what we're gonna do today with our game of Two Lies and a Truth is we are going to get a starting handle on 2 lies that modern education, the modern world at large, teaches us that we believe and that we use and that we function with. And we're going to flip them upside down so that we are then prepared in the next 2 podcast episodes to continue on with the way of the will and the way of the reason. Because guess what? Mason says it like it's so simple, but it's actually a huge mental flip for the modern mom today. So let's play. Number 1. A strong-willed child is characterized by disobedience, tantrums, and general difficulty and stubbornness. Number 2, reason is the greatest compass for all truth and understanding. And number 3, education forms a child's conscience so that it, along with reason, can help a child's will accept or reject ideas. Go ahead, take a second. Tell me the truth and the 2 lies. Yes, of course, number 3 is the only true one. So number 3 is what we are gonna unpack in the following podcast episodes. Like I said, also in the next couple of YouTube videos, probably not the next one, that's something different, but the ones that correspond with the podcast will also be about the way of the will and the way of the reason. How do we form them? How do we teach them? How do we nurture them? How do we strengthen them? However, we're gonna flip over lies 1 and lie 2. So, strong-willed child. If you at all have a child who is struggling with obedience, struggling to do what they are asked, struggling to control themselves, to will themselves towards that which they ought to do instead of that which they want to do in the moment, you will be told by many a person that you are the lucky mama of a strong-willed child. And they will tell you possibly that one day that'll be a very good thing, and I just can never understand how something that is clearly bad in the moment is supposed to become a good thing in the future, because guess what? It's not going to. So, strong-willed children are not children who are stubborn and difficult to parent and refuse to do what you want. That is not a strong will. Mason would say that is actually a very weak will. That child is completely swept up in their own emotions. They cannot actually choose what to do. They're weak. Strength, strong-willed, would imply that a child has a strong will, that they are able to command themselves towards that which is good instead of that which takes over them in the moment. Now, the sneaky thing about this is that a strong-willed child, the way we understand it in our society today, is actually a weak-willed child. But it's not just the difficult child. The other side of that coin, according to Mason, the weak-willed child, is also the child who has the appearance of being very easygoing, who kind of just goes with the flow, easily swept here, easily swept there, never seems to draw a line in the sand, never has a stick in the ground. They just kind of do whatever. That's also a weak-willed child. So basically, what you need to know when it comes to the will of a child is that the will is the gatekeeper. It stands there and it either accepts or rejects the ideas that are presented to it. Ideas come at your child all of the time. They come from you. They hopefully come from the great books you're reading, the great things you're doing in your home education, but also they just come from everywhere. Friends, church, walking on the sidewalk, things they read, things they hear, things they watch. Ideas are constantly coming at a child's will. And for children, when they're very young, their wills are just weak by the fact that they're young. They haven't had time to strengthen them. They haven't put in that practice like a muscle over and over again of choosing what's good. And that onslaught of ideas can really wear a kid out. And I think we all know that. If you have little kids, you know when your child's will has completely tuckered out because they're just taking in all the bad ideas. All the bad ideas seem like good ideas and they're acting on all of them and you're like, what is happening? What is going on? That is when your child's will is just overworked. But the will has to become strong because it's the gatekeeper and it's the gatekeeper for all of life. And we're gonna talk about how you strengthen that will next week in the podcast. But the second thing is don't think that you're very easygoing, easy flower type of child is so great and must have a strong will too because they're never obstinate or they never fight you or they never fight with their siblings. They actually might not care enough about the things they should care about. They still can't commend themselves towards what's right and they're kind of just swept up in what everyone else says. So you've got two sides of the weak-willed child, and I know the obstinate ones get all the attention because it's dramatic and it's difficult. But don't forget about the quiet ones too, because we actually want to gift our children a strong will. So they are able to accept the ideas that Mason would say, support man's soul, help it grow, help it flourish, and reject the ideas that would hurt man's soul. So that's the first lie that we're told in modern world is that strong-willed children are difficult ones. No, strong-willed children choose what's good. Now the second thing is about reason. So you and I, my friend, are so downstream from the Enlightenment, we don't even know it. Ever since the Enlightenment, we have been taught that reason is the greatest of things. Reason is what you need. If you can just be logical, right? If you just think the right way, if you know all your fallacies, if you know this, if you know that, if you can argue super well to the end, then you're a reasonable person. You have a strong sense of reason and you have pretty much accomplished what you need in order to discover truth and understanding in the world. Now, of course, we want to teach our children to be logical, and Mason had no problem with teaching things like logical thought and hoping that children were able to reason their way through an argument and understand what was being said. But she saw then, and I'm going to echo her because she was completely right now, that we over-depend on reason. We think too highly of it. We think that if we are reasonable, then we will be good. Even if you get into like presuppositionalism, is the beginning idea right, which is of course where we're going with Mason, you can still argue reasonably a wrong thing. So for a quick recap, basically reason became king when we moved into the Enlightenment and we started putting all this effort onto useful knowledge. Whether that was because we wanted to do scientific experiments or because we wanted to get people into work, into trade, sometimes a good thing can become a really bad thing. And I would say the Enlightenment kind of became a really bad thing. We lost out on a lot of what we need, what we would call poetic knowledge or, not useful knowledge, the liberal arts, basically. We got rid of those thinking that they didn't really serve a utilitarian purpose. But reason, science, things like that we could prove became king. And here's the problem with that. Reason, as Mason says, is a yes man. I call reason the hype girl. Reason will come in after your will has accepted an idea and prove to you that it's right. If you've accepted the idea, reason will say, you're so right, you're so smart. And if you don't believe me, think about any time you really wanted something. Say that you have just declared with your husband that you guys are on a budget. You're gonna be saving money, you're not spending any money on things that aren't needed, like clothes maybe. But then you find the most perfect dress that you've ever seen in your entire life. It's the perfect color and it has pockets and you know that you can wear it while you're at the playground with your kids and also out on date night. And isn't that the magical unicorn of a dress? And your mind will immediately start turning, saying, well, actually, I haven't gotten any clothes in a while and I don't really buy clothes for myself anyways, and so this would be a really special treat. My birthday's in about 7.5 months, so it's coming up pretty soon. And really, I was gonna buy this other thing, but now I'm not going to so that I can buy this dress. So really, I'm not even spending any extra money. It's totally fine, I can get the dress. That's reason. Reason is a yes man, a hype girl. You know what else came out of the Enlightenment? No overemphasis on individualism. But that would be a video for a different day. Basically, what we have is a yes man in our reason. If we've allowed an idea to come in, if we've accepted it, then our minds will find a way to justify it to ourselves. And so reason, while important, and like we learned in the truth, the third thing I said, that reason paired with conscience helps the will decide what to accept and what to reject. When we have our reason in a good place, it's good, but when it's not, when we overly depend on it, as the modern education system definitely does and the modern world at large surely does, we're actually gonna shoot ourselves in the foot. And this, side note, if you're someone who really loves engaging in debates on social media, this is why it almost never works, right? Because when you go into it, you've already accepted an idea and you're completely stuck in that your reasoning must be right because it might even be logical. Danger, danger, it might be actually be logical, but the idea itself should have been rejected. And that is why I say stay off the internet. Now, I've given you a little teaser there with what do I do with my reason? Oh, it has to be paired with conscience. How do you educate a conscience? That is exactly what you do in education by bringing forth living ideas, which boom, what do you know? There we go. Education is a life. We brought it back to our instruments. Mason has not left us to the wind, to the waters, to the lava. Ooh, do you get out? I hang out with small kids because lava popped in my head very quickly. Education is about training a conscience towards what is good. But you must teach a child what is good so that they know it, they love it, and they are willing to reproduce it. Which, that is not my phrase, that's David Hicks. It's a riff on David Hicks. You should read Norms and Nobility if you really want to know stuff because he's way smarter than I am. Like I always say, come join us over at The Commonplace, the podcast one, and listen to us finish up Mason's 20 Principles, but particularly next week as we dive into the way of the will, because the will is something you can strengthen with your child. You just need to be a good partner, guide, philosopher, and friend. But I bet you know I was going to say that. Now next time on YouTube, so next week what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some Charlotte Mason classical vocabulary. Someone once told me I should write kind of like a dictionary so that when you walk into this world, when you're trying to knock at the front door and you realize you don't know what anyone is talking about, like what is masculine activity? Twaddle? Philosophical anthropology? I'm sorry, what are living ideas? Living books, you said? Compared to what? What other kind of books are there? When you hit that point in the road, you kind of need some help getting the vernacular down. What do all these words mean? What is the verbiage? What is the secret code? Can I be in the club? Can I understand what you're talking about? So next time what we're gonna do is we're gonna run through basically classical Charlotte Mason speak. How do you speak it? What does it mean? And we're gonna go through the top confusing phrases of the Mason pedagogy. Pedagogy is actually one of them. And we are going to continue to get our bearings in the classical Charlotte Mason world because that's why I'm here. So I'm Autumn Kern. Thanks for coming. I'll see you next time.